This is my Brawler guide. I will focus on tanking in this video, but I will also mention a few things that are important for DPS brawlers. If you play Brawler the way I'll show you in this video, then you should be able to hold aggro against most players and do some decent damage, even if you don't have maxed out gear yet. Somebody from my guild taught me how to play this class. She used to do a lot of damage when she still played TERA a few months ago, and I asked her to have a look at the rotations I will mention in this video to make sure I got it right. That being said, I also linked the Brawler Discord below. If you look at the rotations they recommend, you will see that there are some differences. I tried both, and it seems like I'm doing more damage when playing the way my friend told me. If you try both as well, let me know which one works best for you. Anyway, this intro is already long enough, so let's get started. On Brawler, you should make sure that the skill called Growing Fury is active at all times during a boss fight. It gives you a big buff, and when tanking, it even blocks automatically as long as you keep attacking. You still need to time the attacks well though, because a well-timed attack means a well-timed block when Growing Fury is active, which in turn means a lot of the damage the boss would deal to you is reflected back to the boss instead. In fact, the damage difference between defense successful and perfect defense is so big that you need to land perfect defense almost each time to even get close to the maximum DPS this class can do. Also, some of the blockable boss attacks can only be completely blocked with perfect defense, and will leak some damage if your block is timed poorly. Next, let's talk about rage. You have a meter next to your HP bar, which tells you how much rage you have built up. You need to get to 3000 rage points first, so filling up the bar completely, before you can activate Growing Fury. It will then slowly consume rage, however you regain some when attacking or blocking. The moment your meter reaches 0, Growing Fury will stop. So the goal is to keep regenerating it quickly enough, so the meter never reaches 0 in the first place. If you manage to get perfect defense, you will regenerate more rage than with a poorly timed attack, so there's another reason to focus on good timing. Now that you know about rage and perfect defense, we can talk about the actual skills. Brawler doesn't really have a fixed rotation, but rather it has priority skills. Your most important combo is Roundhouse Kick followed by Haymaker, and then 1-inch punch if it is not on cooldown. Roundhouse Kick increases your damage by 15% for 3 seconds, so it is used in order to buff Haymaker, which is your strongest skill. 1-inch punch also does nice damage, however it has a longer cooldown than Haymaker. There is an apex skill called Rhythmic Blows, which is basically the Brawler's burn skill. It can do several sideways punches in a row, and ends with an uppercut as last hit. You don't use all the hits of this skill in a row though. Each hit will reduce the cooldown of Roundhouse Kick and Haymaker, so you use it to increase the amount of buffed Haymakers you can get in. First you cast the Roundhouse Kick Haymaker combo until Haymaker is on cooldown. Then you hit the boss with the first punch of Rhythmic Blows, which will bring Haymaker off cooldown again. You cannot wait too long between 2 hits of Rhythmic Blows though, else it will go on cooldown before you can finish the combo. You have just enough time to do 3 moves between 2 hits of Rhythmic Blows. This means you can do Roundhouse Kick followed by Haymaker followed by 1-inch punch, but then you have to use the next hit of Rhythmic Blows right away. For example, if you have to iframe between 2 hits, then you won't have time to add 1-inch punch after Haymaker. In that case, just skip 1-inch punch and use it after the next Haymaker. In case you're not close enough to the boss to land a hit with Rhythmic Blows in time, then you can just cast it anyway, even though you're missing the target. This will not reduce the cooldown of Haymaker, but it will give you another 3 moves worth of time before Rhythmic Blows goes on cooldown. Now you know how to burn the boss on Brawler, but what to do when Rhythmic Blows is on cooldown? Well, as I said earlier, Haymaker is very important, so you try to get as many of those in as possible. There is also the apex skill called Flying Kick. This one doesn't do as much damage as Haymaker, so it is lower priority. But each hit reduces the cooldown of Rhythmic Blows by 10 seconds. It activates a bit slow, but it can be accelerated by casting it after Haymaker, Piledriver or Jackhammer. 1-inch Punch can actually accelerate casting of Flying Kick as well, however the timing is a little bit trickier to get right. You need to cast Flying Kick at the end of the first part of 1-inch Punch rather than the end of the second part. If you cast it a little bit too early, the second part of 1-inch Punch will be cut off. This is not good because the second part of 1-inch Punch is what does most damage. On the other hand, if you wait a bit too long, then Flying Kick will be slow. So, outside of Rhythmic Blows, while 1-inch Punch is on cooldown, you should cast Roundhouse Kick, Haymaker, Flying Kick, and then fill up with Piledriver and maybe Jackhammer until the next Roundhouse Kick Haymaker combo is off cooldown again. Piledriver is better than Jackhammer, but both are only fillers in this case. When 1-inch Punch is off cooldown, then you should do Roundhouse Kick, Haymaker, 1-inch Punch, Flying Kick, before using filler skills. It is also possible that the cooldown of Haymaker resets. In that case, you should cast Haymaker again right away, even if that means you cast it twice in a row. The only time you might not want to use Haymaker after it resets is during Rhythmic Blows, in case you don't have any moves left. As I said earlier, you want to have Growing Fury active at all times. This means at the start of the fight you have to build up rage very quickly. This can easily be done by starting with the correct combo. First you use Mounting Rage, which will fill up half of your rage meter right away, and it will keep generating more for a short moment. Next you use the skill called Divine Wrath, which lets you jump towards the boss, and it will fill up the rest of your rage meter the moment it hits the boss. Most boss fights start the moment this skill lands. The third skill you use as part of the starting rotation is Infuriate. It draws a great amount of aggro right away, which ensures that the DPS players won't steal aggro before you can even attack. It also enrages the boss, which means everybody can start burning right away. On most bosses, you can get Infuriate done just before the boss hits you with the first attack. The last part of the starting rotation is to activate Growing Fury. The moment you activate this, it also blocks for you, so usually you can block the first boss attack using this skill. Once Growing Fury is active, you start the regular skill priority rotation, which I already explained earlier. There are a few more things that are good to know about the Brawler skills, so let's have a look at that. If you have to iframe an unblockable mechanic, then usually it is best to dodge backwards. You can then follow up with Piledriver, which will make your character jump back towards the boss and deal damage at the same time. Ground Pound can be used if the boss is a little bit too far away to hit him with other skills, but you want the boss to come towards you rather than moving towards the boss. In case you need something quick to get perfect defense, you can use Counter, Punch or Counter Punch. Counter is preferred since it has a 60% chance to increase your DPS by 25% for 6 seconds. In fact, since 25% is a nice boost to your damage, you should block with Counter regularly to refresh the buff. As long as the buff is active, it is best to just time your attacks for perfect defense though. If you die, or you run out of rage for some other reason, then you can use Mounting Rage just like you do at the start of a fight. In longer fights, Divine Wrath might also be off cooldown, so you can use that as well. but keep in mind that the boss might move around a lot if a DPS player has aggro, so Divine Wrath might miss. If you need to block a longer mechanic while Growing Fury is off, then you can use Rampage or Ground Pound. If you lost aggro for some reason, then you can use Provoke to regain a lot of aggro quickly. It also has a short cooldown, so if you have to tank for a party with huge DPS and your gear is too low to keep up, then you can also use Provoke just before you expect to lose aggro. Bull Rush reduces damage taken, and it can gather up groups of regular mobs. Ground Pound can also gather mobs, but only if they are close to you already. If you need to stun some mobs, or if there is a boss mechanic that requires you to use a stun, then Flip Kick is what you need. For the glyph setup, let's first look at everything that you need, independent of your role, and then add the glyphs for tank and DPS afterwards. Grab the Power Link glyph for counter, Ardent for Divine Wrath, and Energetic Bull Rush. You also need Persistent and Empowered Haymaker, as well as Energetic and Power Linked Roundhouse Kick. Get everything for Pile Driver. Everything besides Aggravating for Jackhammer, and both glyphs for Counter Punch. You also need Pumped Growing Fury, Empowered 1-inch Punch, and Energetic Quick Dash. For Tank Brawler, you should add Carving Haymaker and Energetic Infuriate. And for DPS Brawler, you should add Swift Punch, Ardent Ground Pounder, Brilliant Haymaker, and Grounding Roundhouse Kick. Let's look at enhancement points next. There are 4 essential EP which you need to max out. Those are Mighty Attack in the Strength and Offense tab, Mighty Defense in the Defense/Special tab, and Reload for both Roundhouse Kick and Haymaker in the Resource Recovery tab. You should also spend 1 point into Mighty Phoenix in the Defense tab, and 1 point into Propulsion for Jackhammer in the Resource Recovery tab. For the rest, you can either copy my choices, or the example from the Brawler Discord, or you can just pick whatever looks good to you. Just make sure the things you pick actually work during boss fights. For example, a boss cannot be suspended in the air. Also, according to the Brawler Discord, Pummel for Counter Punch in the Strength and Offense tab is broken, so you should not use it. That information is from June 2020 though, and I don't know if it was fixed or if it is still broken. For the skill advancements, you obviously want to max out the level 66, 68 and 70 advancements. You should start with the level 68 advancement for Pile Driver, since that one increases power as well as the damage of Pile Driver. Next you should upgrade the Jackhammer advancement for level 66 and do Flying Kick last. For Haymaker at level 67, you should go with the Resonance option. In some cases, Iron Fist can increase your own DPS more than Resonance. However, according to some information in the Brawler Discord, Resonance also increases the DPS of your party members by 2%. Due to this, you should always use Resonance when running dungeons with a party. For Growing Fury, you should use Sensation of Power in case you're tanking. If you're playing DPS Brawler, then you have to use Irregular, because it increases your DPS significantly, but it also decreases the amount of aggro you take, so you won't steal aggro from the tank. Of course, if you want to Brawler DPS, then this is the first thing you should invest in. And you should not queue dungeons as DPS if you don't have this skill advancement yet. Brawlers have a very low crit cap of around 150. In fact, the minimum amount of crit factor you will get from your gear is enough, so you should be using a full set of power accessories. This is not only true for Tank Brawler, but even more so for DPS Brawler. In my gear guide, I forgot to mention that there are newer etchings which were introduced in patch 99. I linked the patch notes for patch 99 below, so you can have a look at the information on that. Preferably, you should be using those. However, they are still quite expensive, so in the meantime you can use energetic etchings on your weapon and gloves, and either Grounded or Relentless on chest armor and boots. For the innerwear, cards and optional stats, you should focus on physical amplification and physical crit power. When choosing between both, you can assume that 2300 physical amplification is worth about as much damage as 0.05 physical crit power. Though usually it's not that simple. Either way, both are fine, but if you want to squeeze every last bit of DPS out of the class, then you should have a look at the Brawler Discord that I linked below. In the guide section you'll find a Brawler gear guide, which goes into more detail about which one of those stats is best on which item. There is also a very useful spreadsheet, which you can use to calculate the DPS gain for different stat upgrades. I also heard that depending on your class type, physical or magical piercing are very useful in the new patch. However, I don't know how accurate that information is. Well, that concludes this guide. I started adding a section for corrections and additions in the description below my videos. If I notice that anything is missing or wrong after this video goes live, then I will add it there, so make sure to have a look at that as well. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave those below. You can also talk to me on Twitch during my live streams. I switched my schedule around, so now I play TERA on Wednesdays, and on Sundays I either play other games or I do something else completely. For example, the past 3 weeks I followed tutorials about 3D modeling and 2D animation in Blender. Anyway, leave a like if this video was helpful and subscribe for more. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.